Welcome to VIP morning. Ooh, the Ranger booth. I know, Creativation 2020. Yeah, get excited. So I'm just gonna go through and give you kind of an overview of what's new in the world of Tim Holtz and Ranger. I'm gonna break it up with two kind of brand categories because we have distress over here and we have alcohol ink over here. So I'm gonna start with distress and just take you through what's new, and any of these samples that you wanna pick up and take a closer look at, you're welcome to. The first thing, of course, distress embossing glazes, and I'm really excited about these glazes because these are translucent embossing powder. Okay, you might think, well, hello, Captain Obvious, that's not new. Well, because it's a completely different collection of transparent powders, because we know that some embossing powders are opaque, some are transparent, some have a little flex in it. This is designed to be completely transparent and coordinate with the distress when it's melted. So you can see that it's melted color, it's tattered rose, fired brick, rusty hinge, fossilized amber, cracked pistachio, peeled paint, broken china, weathered wood, antique linen, vintage photo, walnut stain, hickory smoke. I can do it in my sleep. These colors are awesome because whether you're putting it over an inked background like I did here, you can still see the texture and color of that inked background. So whether you're putting it over Oxide or distress ink, you get to see those texture, those undertones. Right here, this is showing just those glazes over a stamped image. So there's no distress ink used at all. This is all the color coming from the glaze. So this is clear ink, that powder, and you can see that even over a black stamped image, the black is darker, right? It really intensifies even what you've stamped because that transparent glaze is acting like a reflection, like a mirror. Here it shows over a baseboard doll, so you can use the glaze over chipboard, you can use it over embellishments. And the benefit of having a glaze for me is not only are we getting color, but we're getting that little bit of texture. When we're working with it, you can use it with a stamped image, right? We can add that by just stamping that, choosing a color of glaze, and depending on where that overlaps, it's going to give you different tones, different undertones, because we're dealing with fully transparent colors. The texture of the embossing glazes allows us to also emboss different things besides just using an ink. So for example, this is just showing clear embossing ink and clear embossing powder over Oxide. This is clear embossing ink and the glaze over Oxide. So you can see by just using some fired brick, now we're getting like a whole different look than just clear, which is nothing. The texture of this allows me to emboss with water. So this is no ink at all. This is just literally taking water, flicking it on, taking my glaze, pouring it over the water droplets, and emboss with water, and you're getting all of those great splats and splatters. So if you wanted to take water and just mist it into an area and get a big puddle, you can pour the glaze on there, heat emboss water. Yeah, but you can do that. You can also use it over different texture paste, right? Embossing paste, anything that's going to be wet long enough so you can take paste through a stencil. You can go in with your glaze, sprinkle different colors, which is what I did here, and then when you melt it, because they're transparent, all of the colors can actually overlap to create new colors. So you get not only that shine and glaze, but also that texture. Now these glazes can be used on a variety of different substrates, not just paper. Here the glazes are used on metal, like an Ideology clip. That's how the clip started. That's what it looks like with some hickory smoke glaze melted over the top of it. I know, pretty wild. Looks like that galvanized metal. You can use it over wood. But if you're doing something vintage, see, even they're excited about it. And I don't blame them at all.
We don't even know what booth they're in.
That's right. They're like, I heard it and I love the glaze. So when you're embossing, if you don't want that shine, after it embosses, just go over it with steel wool like we did here. So now you can see those number blocks, they almost look waxed. And that works even on a card. So if you ever want to use those transparent glazes on something but you don't want the shine, after it embosses, just a little steel wool and it will look like you embossed with wax because you're getting that translucent effect. So of course there's different ways that we can adhere these powders. We've had the Distress Embossing Ink Pad, but we need some different ways. Embossing pens, nothing new, right? Other than these are new to the Distress line, but if you have embossing pens, there's nothing different about this ink than you already have. Just going to be completely candid. But it is important to have it in the Distress line because from a maker perspective, it's nice to give permission of like, this works with this, right? And I love the fact that these pens, I wanted something that had a different type of nib. We have brush and bullet. So the brush nib, it's just used like over a doll where you just go in, color with the ink, take the powder, heat emboss. So you can tint photos without using any ink at all. It's all done just with the powder. And this gives you full control as to where you want to put the ink. We also did a Distress embossing dabber. Now Ranger has an embossing dabber. Their dabber has a foam top. I wanted something with a fabric top. And the reason is when you're using this, you don't need it to be very juicy to get the powder to stick, all right? In fact, if you have too wet of ink, especially in a mixed media approach, if you put too much embossing ink on a surface, even if you put the powder on, even if you melt the powder, as soon as it cools, it's going to chip off. It's going to fall right off because that glycerin of the embossing ink is now trapped between, say, metal and the embossing powder. So you need a very thin application, and that's what this does. So when you use the dabber, see, I agree. They're like, that's like brilliant. So when you use this, you simply dab it down, just puts a little bit of that ink, and you can spread it out. So you can see just how thin I can use that ink. So I can use it on a stamp, I can use it around the edge of something like chipboard, and I can get all of those cool kind of random fade out of my glaze. So this gives you control.
Customers, should they squeeze the embossing ink?
Denied. No, that is why it's called an embossing dabber, not an embossing squeezer. Okay. Because if you squeeze this, there's a valve in here that needs to open to allow the goo out, right? So there's a little valve, and so when I press down, it like clicks open that valve, allowing this to go out. And so if you squeeze it, you'll pop the top and you'll have ink everywhere, and you'll have to pop it back on. But see, I just set that down, and you see how much stuff comes out, and I didn't squeeze at all. Right?
You can make some really fun effects with that, just like that.
There's a wonderful card over there by Jennifer McGuire where all she did was dab dots and use the glaze, and it has these great shiny polka dots. But you can see how much ink comes out just from dabbing it on there, and then you simply spread it out. So it's weird because I think, you know, as card makers, we always thought like, oh, when we're inking with embossing ink, like we have to just really juice it up, and that's not the case at all. I mean, we can emboss with water, come on. So in addition to having different embossing products, we also have some different medium products. So we have texture paste. Now texture paste, nothing new to the world of Ranger, but it is new to the distress line. So this is the Ranger texture paste just put into the distress line because the texture paste works so perfect with distress. We can use oxide, sprays, stains, ink pads, and this will absorb color just like paper would. The crackle, amazing, because you can put this on, it will crackle. It is foolproof, whether you use it thick, thin, with your finger, with a palette knife. As soon as it touches something, it will crack when it dries, and it will crack on wood, metal, glass, plastic, you name it. That paste will go on, and of course we can colorize it. We also put it in smaller jars, right? In today's mixed media world, you know, we're more collectors than users, so, you know, we used to think like, oh, a big jar would be good, but a big jar, it's just gonna go to waste. So I just thought like a nice 2-ounce jar was usable for today's maker. And then we have grit paste. We introduced grit paste a few years ago. It's this wonderful gritty paste that's perfect for rust and brick textures and all sorts of things that we can paint. But now we've introduced a translucent grit paste. And the translucent grit paste is perfect because when you put it onto metals or things like that, we can get more of an authentic rust because we're not covering that surface. The regular grit paste is gesso based, so it puts that white foundation down that you have to cover. This, because it doesn't have any color, wherever it dries, it literally is gritty. It's just gonna, yeah, it's gonna hold on, it's gonna give it a whole different effect of grunge. Then we have our tin, our distress ink tin. It's hilarious that we actually wanted this tin before any of our tins, and it ended up being the last one, but listen, it was worth the wait. So this, of course, holds your original distress inks or oxides. It holds 15 ink pads. It has a clear base on there, and the reason that this little kind of insert is in there is because in the years of distress ink, there have been lids that are perfect, lids that you have to match up to get them on, and lids that you flip over and it just falls off. And whatever lids you have, it doesn't matter because the storage takes care of that. Because that base comes up far enough that doesn't matter how this sits, this becomes airtight when you put it away. So when you put that in, it seals that lid to the pad, right? You can store them sideways, even though people freak their freak thinking it's not gonna work like that. And I will tell you, it depends on where you live. If you live in a high humid environment, your ink pads might just be too wet to store them like that. Well, the tin's also designed to sit like that, right? So you can store them upright. If you still want to store them upside down because you don't believe anything else that I say, you can take out the insert and you could flip it over, snap it back in, and they'll all be upside down. It's fine. Another great thing, even though this holds 15, is these tins are designed to be stackable, right? So this actually locks together. So these tins, we put a higher lip on this and we put a rolled base on that, so when you put it on, they'll stack. So when you put them on your shelf, you don't have to worry about them all sliding off. So definitely put some thought into this tin and how people are going to want to store their distress. All right. Last thing in the world of distress is cracked leather cardstock. This is a really unique cardstock. It's right there, yeah. It's textured. It's a white cardstock, 111 pound. You can ink it, you can spray it, you can blend it, you could even stamp on it, but I love the realistic leather look and texture. This has ink, crayon, and a little bit of paint on there, so now we can create beautiful leather looks and use a paper punch. Yeah, you want to feel a vision. I know, she's like, I need to feel that. Has a really cool texture, but you can put it over vignette boxes, over a planner, use your paper punches, your die cuts, but it is cardstock. And it doesn't have to be brown grungy leather. It could be pink patent leather. It could be red. You know, it could be any color you want it to be because the cardstock starts white. And this is available 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, as well as 8 1/2 by 11 sheets, right? Full sheets of that. All right, moving on to the world of alcohol inks. Alcohol inks have gone from just card making to mixed media to home deck and obviously to a whole fine art arena. So we introduced 15 new colors of alcohol ink. I encourage you to definitely take a look at the swatch board because you can see where the new colors are. It's right on the other side of this column. All of our 15 colors are much more deep, bright, vibrant because today's alcohol ink user is thinning out their color with 91% isopropyl alcohol. Great for floating color, but it also dilutes the color quite a bit. So we wanted to create more intense colors knowing how today's alcohol ink user is using the inks. And that's going to allow them to still pour color down and get those rich, rich tones of all of the colors. In addition to these 15 new colors, we have alcohol alloys. These alloys are amazing. They are a leafing metallic, so it makes it different than a mixative. There are 5 different colors. There's gilded, statue, sterling, mined, and foundry. So basically a copper, brass, silver, gold, and a platinum. Now, the alloys work different than a mixative. A mixative has always been designed to mix in with alcohol ink. When you use a metallic mixative with alcohol ink and you stamp it, you get that really nice, subtle, metallic veining, if you will. The alloys, completely different type of metallic, okay? It is a leafing metallic, yeah. So when you use it, its purpose is to actually stay together. It wants to clump, it wants to break apart to create really beautiful, luminous looks on our backgrounds. And you can use it on Yupo, you can use it on alcohol ink cardstock, you can use it on metals, anything that you would use alcohol inks on, you can use the alloys. But you do need to use the alloys with either ink and or blending solution because you need a resin to bond the metallic pigments to the surface. If you just use alloys and isopropyl, there's so much metallic in there that it will rub off with your fingers. So you still need, even if it's just a drop of that in your mixture, it's enough to bond that metallic to the surface. Variety of different surfaces, of course. We've got our black cardstock, our glossy cardstock, our Yupo, metallic foil, sparkle cardstock, the brush metallic, but we've introduced Yupo in 8x10 sheets now as well. So even though we initially set out for 5x7 for the card maker, like we want it bigger, but we don't want big pads. It's like, okay, so now we have the happy medium. And we have these hardcore art panels. So these are a wood panel laminated with vinyl on both sides. We have them in squares and rectangles. This show we release these hexagons. They're fantastic for alcohol ink, as you can see. You can do lift ink on there, you can stamp on there, you can do so many great things with this. And of course, you can even do resin, which I'll get to in just a minute. But this little guy, this is the gadget that people are talking about because, well, sometimes it's simple. It's a simple tool, right? So this is the alcohol ink air blower, and all it's designed to do is blow air. And it seems silly, but this soft rubber ball that has these little ridges on there and this big opening is going to allow me to move or actually paint with air, right? So a different way to move my inks around. So when you see all these cool little paintings and all that, that's just done with the air blower. And it's quite simple. We can take this, perfect. We can take this, I'll take just a little bit of isopropyl. Again, that's 91% or higher. You can take just a color of our ink, and you can see how it just kind of suspends in that isopropyl, almost kind of gel-like. We can even put a drip of this, and I could even take a drip of alloy. It's like, I'm telling you, it's like speed round demo where they're like, you have 3 minutes.
Speed dating,
3 minutes, that's it. And then we're just going to take the blower. So watch how I can move this ink, right? So I have a way to control and actually float and pull that color completely different ways. I can break up that alloy, I can move that color over there just with air. It's very cool. And that's what I'm saying, it's one of those duh tools where you're like, that is just the stupidest thing, and then you see it and you're like, oh my gosh. Yeah. Even someone that does watercolor, you could take that and even blow around watercolor in ink, if you're painting. So I'm gonna go in with some more alcohol, and I'm even gonna do a little drip of blending solution because I want some resin in there in addition to my ink. And I'll just start moving that around. So if you did this, you're going to create that white dot. This is about tiny little puffs of air to really move and manipulate that color exactly the way you want it to be. Once you're happy with it, you can continue to just kind of lightly blast this with some air, or you can use a heat tool to set it exactly where you want. But to me, I just love, see how that alcohol ink is creating those little lines? That's all done just with air. just taking that and just moving it. And you can see that I'm not even applying a ton of pressure, right? It seems silly, but see this little air blower? Like, there's a lot of air that actually comes out of this. I'm telling you, it's a dud tool, but it took us over a year to figure this thing out, you know? 'Cause it was like, this is too hard, this is too soft, this is too this, but yeah, pretty awesome. So that is the alcohol ink air blower, and then I'll jump to this. This is just part of the alcohol ink line, which is clear resin. We get a lot of people that want to resin their alcohol ink. So this clear resin kit, equal parts of A and B, little cup, mix it up, and then when you pour it over your alcohol ink, you get an amazing resin surface that doesn't react with any of the inks. Pretty awesome. So, speed round of demo, Creativation 2020. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks for watching this video that was filmed in Phoenix, Arizona at AFCI's 2020 Creativation event. If you liked this video and want to see more from Scrapbook.com, please like, share, subscribe, and leave a message. Happiness is life handmade.